Good morning, everyone. This is Carl Nelson at Center for Energy and Environment here. Thank you all for joining our webinar this morning. We have a great lineup and we're going to have a great presentation for you. It's to give you a little bit of project background. We did this project for the City of St. Paul, and it was part of their effort in climate planning to look for strategies that could help a large fraction of large buildings cost effectively save energy. What can the city do to help influence those buildings that are in their jurisdiction to reduce their energy use cost effectively? In this effort, we had a number of partners I want to recognize. First of all, of course, the City of St. Paul and Xcel Energy, through their Partners in Energy program, helped to develop the Climate Action Plan for the building sector for the City of St. Paul, and they were an advisor to us in this project, as well as District Energy St. Paul. Served in an advisory role as well. And this project couldn't have happened without the support of the City Energy Project, which is a joint initiative of the Natural Resources Defense Council and the Institute for Market Transformation. So they helped to fund this study. Today, we're going to talk about moving some of the insights that we developed through our research in St. Paul into action. And that is the focus at Center for Energy and Environment of a lot of our research. We're very data-driven, so our approach to solving problems starts with the research. This research produces insights, and we work to turn those insights into action. So that's exactly what we're going to hear about today in the context of St. Paul's desire to get energy savings from large buildings. So first of all, Lester Shen is CE's Director of Innovative Technologies. He's got a PhD in mechanical engineering as well as a background in design thinking from his past work heading up a program at a design school. Then we're going to hear from Nicole Kessler. She is a former NASA engineer and is the program manager for the Energy Intelligence Program serving small industrial sector and has been applying her experience to this sector, the large building sector. And finally, we're going to hear from Molly Janice Smith, who has a background in corporate sustainability efforts and was the lead for implementing St. Paul's Race to Reduce program, which they did this summer, and we'll hear more about. With that, I'll turn things over to Lester.
Okay. I'm going to be describing the results of a study we did that culminated in this large building operation report, which is now available and can be downloaded on the internet. The goal of the project was to help the City of St. Paul develop strategies in terms of how they could get their large commercial buildings to save energy and to help them achieve some of their sustainability goals. The way we undertook this study was we wanted to look at building operations, taking a more user-centric approach rather than looking at typical measures that are more capital intensive, like equipment replacement, lighting systems, HVAC, mechanical systems. And so we wanted to look at how we can assess how well a building is operating and how we can make it operate more efficiently. And by operational efficiency, we're talking about looking at the building equipment, the existing building equipment, and seeing how we can operate it at an optimal level of energy usage. Okay, so how can we see where there might be wastes where there are energy wastes and how we can take care of those. In order to determine what the current state of building practice was in St. Paul, we did interviews with almost a dozen building operators and other building professionals, and we also conducted a review of other efforts nationally. Building operators are the key to operating and maintaining their buildings. They're the ones that are inside the buildings. They're the ones that are responding to what the building conditions are. When we talk about efficient operation, what we mean by that is, are the services of the building being delivered with the least amount of waste possible? Okay. With this in mind, then we ask the building operators 2 questions. Do they know whether their buildings are actually even operating efficiently? Do they know if the equipment is, or how and where the equipment is wasting energy? And then the second question is, do they know what actions to take to fix those inefficiencies? So what is the call to action? What makes building operators take action to make their buildings perform better? From our interviews, the main motivator is our occupant complaints. Either the building is too cold or the building is too hot. And once building operators hear complaints from the occupants, these are attempted to be resolved as urgently as possible. The second major motivator is from the building management side. The building operates according to an annual budget, and there is a budget for energy use and operations. And from a management standpoint, if the budget is covered from year to year, then everything is good. If the operations are exceeding the budget, then the building operators will hear from their management to take action. The interesting thing about having an annual budget is that this is now built in as a fixed cost for the building. And so basically, as long as the building operator operates the building below these costs or within these costs, there's really no motivation to try to save energy or to reduce costs. And so there's not really a motivation from above to operate the building more efficiently as long as the costs are being met. So when we asked building operators if they were operating their buildings efficiently, they said they were. And the reasons they said they were operating their buildings efficiently was, one, they weren't getting complaints. So if you have happy tenants, your building is being operated efficiently. The second guideline for operating a building properly is that all of the measures, basically the set points, are being regulated according to preset set points. And as long as the building was being operated within these numbers, then again, the building was being operated efficiently. And then finally, if there were no complaints, if the building owner and the property manager were happy, then the building was operating efficiently. And so those were the 3 major measures for how building operators knew that they were doing their jobs properly. But as I was talking about before, there are some, beyond, underneath these smooth waters, there are a lot of opportunities, and there are a lot of hidden costs that could be looked at to make the building operate more efficiently. And one of those are the energy bills. And if you look at the bottom line, if the energy bills can be reduced, then you reduce your energy costs, and then you have an added stream of revenue because you're bringing in fixed revenue and rent from your occupants. If you reduce the costs, then those savings, which can be as much as 10 to 30%, that can be obtained through operational efficiency, that's 10 to 30% that can go into the pockets of the building owner. And so it's these hidden costs that we're looking at in terms of operational efficiency. It means using less energy, it means emitting less greenhouse gases, and it means providing more revenue to the building owners. So let's look at the primary stakeholders then. The building operator is basically the linchpin. They're the ones that are in charge of operations and maintenance of the building. The occupants are inside the building. They're the ones that are using the energy. They provide feedback to the building operator, as we mentioned before, through complaints. They also pay rent to the property manager, and they have their monthly rent. An issue with this is that in their rent is typically couched the energy costs, which means the occupants really don't see how much they're using. And so there's not really a motivation for the occupants to save energy because they get no benefit. And this is typically known as split incentives. And then the property manager are the ones that own the building. They're getting the rent from their occupants, but they are also paying the energy bills. And they're the ones that are in a position to motivate the building operator towards operational efficiency by motivating him or directing them to reduce the energy waste in the building. Most large buildings have a building automation system, a BAS. And the building automation system basically uses sensors and controls that provide centralized and automated control of the building system, such as the HVAC, heating, ventilating, and air conditioning, lighting, and other systems like security. And these are a tool that that building operators rely on so that they can see what the building set points are, as well as through their sensors they can get warnings where there might be some issues with some failures or other issues with the building systems. And then the building automation system then adds another partner to the building operator, and that's the mechanical and controls contractors. And this is a very important stakeholder. They work in partnership with the building operator, and that the controls contractors oversee the building automation systems. They help with the scheduling, help with the controls, go through the warnings and send warnings to the building operators, and then the building operators also communicate to the controls contractors with regard to what the settings or controls of the building are during operation, as well as if there are issues with the building, sending service orders to the controls contractors so that service technicians can be sent out of the building to service any of the equipment. And then in that partnership, the building operators are on site to be the feet on the ground in order to maintain and check on the building equipment as it's running in the building. So in review, these are the key barriers to operational efficiency that we presented in the report. Basically, I think that the important things to note are, if we're talking about operational efficiency, we really do need to to help building operators understand how energy is being wasted in the building, where the building equipment is being used inefficiently or is being operated inefficiently. And then the second thing is, for both building operators and building controls contractors, operational efficiency needs to be prioritized. That's something that we need to find ways to motivate both parties into having energy efficiency be a primary motivation. And then finally, the issue of split incentives is a really important issue that needs to be addressed. Building occupants are the ones that use the energy, and they need to be made more aware and engaged. And with that, I'll turn it over to Nicole to talk about strategies and approaches to involve the community.
Thanks, Lester. So what we're looking at here is a broad-based framework for designing a community approach to achieving more efficient building operations. As Lester mentioned, in addition to the interviews he conducted, the team also looked at other programs across the country when putting this together. So the first aspect of this approach is really a place where we can see the city taking a key role, and that is in making a visible commitment and motivating not only the building operators but also the property owners. So if the property owners in the city make a visible commitment to more efficient operation, that should then, we hope, motivate building operators to take action to achieve those deeper savings in building operations. Of course, these actions would have to have some sort of support to help support the operators in identifying the opportunities available and implementing those actions, and that can come in different forms, from having a technical advisor, potentially providing some training to operators, and even person-to-person or peer-to-peer networking, as this is a community approach. Finally, the results of these actions should be tracked. Being able to see the impact of your results is important in helping to develop that culture of continuous improvement, which will help continue the cycle of motivation and action. So there are two aspects of a program design that are discussed in the paper. The first is how the city can help establish challenge goals, peer sharing structure, and recognition structure, which Molly will be talking about later in her presentation. And the second aspect is developing a retuning framework within a program design, which I will be discussing. So when we talk about retuning, as Lester mentioned, we're not talking about large capital improvements, but rather looking at the systems that currently exist and making low to no cost changes to the system to help them operate more efficiently, analogous to this piano coming in to get retuned and not having a bunch of parts replaced. So for example, a low-cost action might be identifying and replacing a faulty sensor in a system. No-cost action might be changing system schedules to more closely match building occupied hours. Another example would be to adjust system set points, which is what we've got here in this slide. This is an example of a hot water loop that needed some adjustments on the system set points. What you see here are the blue data points, which are from the system prior to being retuned, and the red data points, which is the system post-retuning. And then the point to take away here is that the delta between the blue line and the yellow line, that is the savings that are being achieved from that no cost action, that retuning measure. So then these retuning measures, through these retuning measures, we operate the systems more efficiently, which also results in reduced operating costs, which can continue to add to that motivation for the building to continue these actions. So when we look at what elements should be included into a retuning framework, there are 4 that we describe in the paper. The first is providing informational resources for the building staff to be able to conduct these retuning measures. And we're not talking about developing these resources from scratch. There's plenty of resources already publicly available. The screenshot here on the screen is from PNNL's website and includes a bunch of their resources that they have available guiding individuals on how to conduct retuning measures. So when looking at a framework, what it's really important to do, it's a matter of pulling together the appropriate resources for the climate and the building stock. That way, the building staff doesn't have to do that themselves, and they're given some more specific direction. A second element to the retuning framework would be to conduct seasonal building retuning campaigns. So in these retuning campaigns, you're highlighting retuning measures specific to systems that are especially important to double check during certain times of year. For example, a check your economizer campaign to make sure you're actually getting that free cooling from that system. And because we're talking about a community-based approach, a campaign amongst participants can also help create a sense of community around these efforts to get systems ready for operation. Another key element is to provide some level of technical support to building operators to help them identify measures and implement those measures. And technical support can come in many forms, but one of the ones I want to highlight in this webinar and to build off of what Lester mentioned is that there is potential for the mechanical and controls contractors to play a role here because they have access to and can adjust settings in the building automation system. A program design should really take a closer look at the relationship between those contractors and the building operator and understanding how that relationship is utilized and how we can emphasize that relationship in helping to get these buildings operating more efficiently. Lastly, having some sort of tool to track and view progress is another really important element, key again to helping support that culture of continuous improvement. What you have here on the screen are two different examples of different tools. On the left is a screenshot from a dashboard provided by Power Takeoff. What you're looking at here is a building's electric load over the course of a day. So this is a 24-hour period. It happens to be a Saturday. And the solid red line, let me see if this will work here. So this solid red line here, that is the building's load for the current day. And this is post-action being taken. The dotted red line is the building's load averaged over the previous 5 Saturdays. And looking at the previous building's energy, the previous energy use, it was noted that there's equipment being left on during these unoccupied periods. So through discussion with the building staff, it was decided or determined that this equipment schedules could be adjusted. And this is an example of getting some of that immediate feedback. When we adjusted the schedule on that equipment, it's very obvious here the impact that that made to the energy use. The demand during those hours dropped significantly, and it's a sign to the operator that their actions have energy savings and that they should continue. Not all buildings will have 15-minute interval data available from the utility, but if you've got a building automation system that allows you to send up trend data on certain systems, you might be able to use that in a similar fashion to get that feedback. Long-term data, however, can also be tracked, and what I've included here is a screenshot from Energy Star's Portfolio Manager. Portfolio Manager is a free resource. Buildings are using it to get Energy Star certified, and they're using it in their benchmarking efforts. And this is where I'm actually going to hand off to Molly Janice Smith, who's going to talk more about St. Paul's benchmarking efforts.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. As mentioned before, I'm Molly Janice Smith. I'm with the City of St. Paul, and I work on building energy here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the programs that we've had launch over the past few months. In late May, we launched the Race to Reduce with Mayor Carter and the council president and leaders in the building owners and operators community. The goal of the program was to is to benchmark 100 buildings citywide, and we thought that it was really important, and based on what we have learned from working with our partners at CEE and Excel Energy, we thought it was really important to have that visible, tangible commitment from leadership to kick us off into the challenge. Next slide. Another thing that we're doing is we're providing educational and technical support that is seasonally based. So the Race to Reduce was a summer challenge this past summer, and so we had different themes for every month. For 1 month, we had a theme on heating, ventilation, air conditioning, and how it gave some tips on how to retune those systems. We also have had come together and start to create that community of practitioners that the CEE team has been talking about. And we're planning a recognition ceremony for later this month to again show that tangible leadership commitment, as well as to give our operators and owners a chance to stand up and be recognized for their leadership in energy efficiency, and for many of them, benchmarking the first time. Next slide. So what we're up to next is Energize St. Paul is the umbrella program that the Race to Reduce sits under, and we want to bring it in line and continue to build out the program in line with the mayor's priorities. One of his priority areas is resilience. So we're working with Mayor Carter and his staff to do that. Another thing that we would love to provide now that we have this great community of engaged building owners and operators is a more refined retuning approach and some hands-on technical support so that building operators can get information that's a bit more specific to their building and can really start to go through a process of retuning all of those systems and realizing those savings that the team was talking about earlier.
Unmuted.
All
Next
right.
slide.
All right, great. Thank you, Molly. And now we have time for some question and answers here. So I'd encourage people again, if they do have questions, to submit them online. So first, we have one question here. What observations or differences in operational approaches or attitudes were found between commercial, residential, and government, if any? I'm going to turn that over to Lester.
Okay, well, let's start with residential. The part about residential is typically the building operators are in control of the common areas. And so some of the things they can do there is clearly HVAC and lighting. But the main energy use issues with residential are within the units. And in that case, we're starting to deal with a lot of behavioral issues. And that is more either on, well, that's probably either on an individual basis for finding motivations within the, say, the condo owners or the apartment dwellers, or other efforts that maybe the building owner or property manager can do. But it was pretty much beyond the efforts of what the building operators could do. And so that was something that we found that was unique with the residential side. On the commercial side, there was a difference between whether the building was owner-occupied or tenant-occupied. And I think with tenant-occupied buildings, that's where split incentives come in. With owner-occupied buildings, I think there's a bit greater opportunity because the bottom line in energy costs are now much more obvious to the building owner, and I think there are greater opportunities there. On the governmental side, I think the governmental side, there is clearly a more concerted effort towards energy efficiency. But again, I think the primary area is how the building operator and the controls contractor can work together. And often if they weren't working in consort, or if their common goal was maybe askew from what the governmental building or institution was trying to achieve, there could be some efforts that were not necessarily towards operational efficiency. I hope that
That was a big
answers that.
question. Yeah, there's a lot of nuances there. We could probably do a whole another webinar on that topic. But thanks, Lester, for that response. Another question. So you did this work focusing on St. Paul. To what extent do you think this approach might apply to other cities? Minneapolis might be the obvious one, but are there other cities? What about smaller cities? Lester, do you want to attack that one, or do you want me to?
Well, I think on some, I think the issues dealing with, I think it's hard. It's a hard one. On one level, municipalities and cities can make this part of sustainability efforts, and that's, I think, what St. Paul is working on. That's what Minneapolis is working on, and that's what I think many other communities are using as a strategy, and I think that's a good strategy. It's a way of providing some external motivators or external efforts to get building owners and property managers aware of the opportunities of energy efficiency, and from that awareness to provide guidance, direction, and motivation to building operators. So I think that's an important piece. I think in some ways it'd be nice to see some maybe even a higher level of input, because a lot of these building owners have portfolios in which the buildings are not necessarily in one municipality. So if there's ways of extending beyond the territories of the different municipalities, it would be interesting if there was an approach that way too.
I just want to add one more thing to that as well. We didn't talk much about this, but a lot of cities have been enacting benchmarking ordinances where the larger buildings are required to benchmark their energy use, and Minneapolis is one of those cities. And I think this is a very complementary approach, and that was very deliberate on our part to a benchmarking ordinance. So to the extent that the cities have those or are considering those, I think that would be a good complementary effort to that.
Yeah, can I jump in for just a second, Carol? Yeah, so I think it's a great question, and a couple of different things come to mind. One is that, large, small, or medium, a lot of cities are making big commitments to, to step up where perhaps there's been a lack of federal oversight in terms of climate change. And so large or small cities, St. Paul included, have very ambitious goals. In St. Paul, we have a carbon neutral goal in our municipal buildings by 2030, and we have a goal that all buildings citywide will be carbon neutral by 2050. And so if you think about it from that perspective, we really can't afford to leave any savings on the table, whether it be in our municipal buildings or in our community buildings. And so, this is the first step, and this is an opportunity to get a quick win and to really demonstrate the value of efficiency, because you're talking about actions that require, there is a cost, they require time, but you're not talking about, major capital improvements here. You're talking about retuning. And so I think that, from the perspective of a city, you know, this is a very natural place to start. And also on the benchmarking side, you know, again, when the question gets asked, okay, I benchmarked my building, now what do I do? This is a great next step because we are talking about, you know, very quick savings and very fast return.
Okay, thank you. Yes. Were you going to say something else, Nicole? Okay. Another question, and this is kind of related to your response, Molly, is so you talked about operational efficiency, but a lot of energy savings has occurred through doing retrofits, replacing equipment. What is the intersection between this kind of operational savings effort and retrofits? Yeah, that's a great question. And maybe I'll just take an initial response at that. You know, I think when we talked to the building operators, they were all very aware of those retrofit opportunities. And so, you know, lighting retrofits, a lot of them have been doing lighting retrofits recently. The First National Bank building in St. Paul was a prominent example of a major retrofit that had been done that saved a ton of energy. But we really saw this operational efficiency as a gap. It was a blind spot, as Lester talked about, in the current to the building operators, and it was something that's not being addressed. And secondly, it can apply to a broad swath of buildings, whereas retrofits require capital, and you have to budget for that, and it might take some time to do that. It might take it might be harder to do that across a wide range of buildings in a fast time period. And like Molly talked about, you know, we're looking at how can we get a large number of buildings to save some energy. In terms of the intersection between the two, you know, I think that there is a correlation here, and through engaging building operators on the operational efficiency more, that can help with driving awareness and increasing awareness and motivation to do retrofits as well.
Yeah, I think one thing that we noticed in the interviews was that a lot of times the building operators looked at capital improvement as a panacea for energy efficiency. And so whenever we spoke about how they can improve the operations of their building, they would say, okay, you know, we've budgeted for lighting, we need to replace the lighting, or we recognize that we can improve our equipment by getting VFDs, and that's in the plan. And again, so in a way, it was one piece is that it as Carl said, it delays action from being taken on things that can be done immediately and for much lower cost. And the other thing is it masked and made it helped the building operators not confront the issue that the building and the equipment were not operating efficiently at that time, that there were many opportunities or many ways that the building equipment was wasting energy that they were just not even aware of. And in that way, I think the Capital Improvements Act acted as a barrier to an understanding about operational efficiency. And I think moving towards operational efficiency and getting that to be standard practice can be something that in fact may open opportunities for more capital improvement, but I think it's also something that needs to be done as a priority, which currently isn't done at all.
Right, and there are synergies between this approach and the retrofits. They're not mutually exclusive. Molly, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I think you guys covered it.
We've got time for one more question here. Let's see. We've got, for the St. Paul benchmarking effort, were many participants already conducting benchmarking? So I think that's a question to you, Molly, but for the mayor's goal of the 100 buildings.
Right. Of the public buildings, yes. Public buildings in Minnesota are
Muted.
working. On the multifamily side, not as common for those buildings to be benchmarking. And so some of them are in other benchmarking systems other than Portfolio Manager, which is what we and dozens of other cities across the United States use. In the multifamily sector, there are some tools that are more specific to that sector, and there's been a understandably large focus on just the portions of the building that are consuming energy that the owners themselves pay for. Obviously, a lot of multifamily tenants pay for their own energy usage. So in that sector, benchmarking is not nearly as commonplace, and what has been done has been mostly focused on the energy consumed in those common spaces that the owner pays for. In the commercial sector, it seems like it's been a lot more common, particularly with larger portfolios and with buildings that are already performing, high enough to get, say, LEED certified or to get Energy Star certification. So it really varies by sector, but I'm going to hazard a guess that, somewhere around a third or a half of our buildings are benchmarking for the first time.
All right, great. Thank you, Molly. And thank you to all our contributors, all our presenters today as well. I think we're going to, that's all the time for questions we have today. I would encourage you, if you're found this presentation interesting, to take a look at our report and contact us directly with any follow-up questions that you might still have. Thank you very much, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.